there, I just can't get over the simplicity of cooking dinner in just one pot on the stove. You literally just dump the ingredients in. It can't get any easier than that. Also, you have very minimal dishes. So today I will be sharing 15, yes, I said 15, of my family's favorite one-pot dinners. These dinners have simple ingredients, they're total crowd pleasers, and we just love them. Let's get to my kitchen and let's get to cooking. To kick us off today, we are making this one-pot chicken broccoli Alfredo lasagna. So to this pot on my stove, I added in 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Now add in a tablespoon of minced garlic and stir it around until it's fragrant. It will only take about 15 seconds. Now I'm adding in 2.5 cups of chicken broth, followed by 1.5 cups of heavy cream. Now for the seasonings, I'm going to toss in a teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of pepper, and then 1 teaspoon of Italian seasoning. We absolutely love this dinner in my house. I have made it all year round and we just make it very often because it is so good. But now I'm going to break in 10 lasagna noodles, just break them into super small pieces just so they're easier to eat in the end. Next, add in 3 cups of cooked shredded chicken. Go ahead and cook up your chicken anyhow. You could cook it up like in the Instant Pot, use a rotisserie chicken or canned chicken, really use any type of chicken, but let this simmer on your stove for about 15 minutes or until the pasta is tender. If you have my cookbook, you will find this recipe on page 120 and it is in the one pot meals section. I have over 100 recipes in my cookbook and there's 8 different sections. I have it all in this cookbook. Also, I'm offering free shipping right now, but once the pasta is tender, if the liquid line looks like it's getting too low, go ahead and add in 1/2 cup of water. Next, add in 12 ounces of frozen broccoli. Let the broccoli cook for about 5 to 7 minutes or until it is tender, and then if you're a cheese fan, go ahead and add in 1 cup of shredded mozzarella cheese. Once the cheese melts down, you could serve this up. I have no words for this one-pot lasagna. Every single time I make it, my husband says I should make it more often. It really is just that good. It is so flavorful, rich, and delicious. Also, you could add like Cajun seasoning to this if you'd like. You could add like different seasonings if you would like to give it different flavors. It also makes for great leftovers for the next day. Now we are making this ground beef potato skillet. So on my cutting board right here, I'm peeling and dicing a sweet potato and a russet potato, or you could use 2 russet potatoes or 2 sweet potatoes, whatever you'd like. But over to the pan on my stove, I added a pound of ground beef along with a diced yellow onion. Just cook this ground beef through at this point. Now that it's cooked through, I added in a tablespoon of taco seasoning, 1/2 cup of water, a tablespoon of minced garlic. Next, 6-ounce can of diced green chilies that adds a lot of flavor. Then a 14-ounce can of fire roasted diced tomatoes along with the potatoes that we cut up earlier. Give this a stir and let this simmer on your stove for about 20 minutes. You do want to stir this frequently while it's simmering just so the potatoes don't stick to the bottom of your pan. But now that my potatoes are fork tender, to check to see if they are fork tender, just poke a little fork in there and see if the potatoes are softer. I'm adding in 1/2 cup of Mexican style cheese. Just let the cheese melt down and then you could serve it up. If you're not a cheese fan, you don't have to add the cheese, but here's what my plate looks like. I topped mine with a little bit of sour cream, avocado, diced tomatoes, and cilantro. This is a wonderful lower carb dinner. It is so flavorful. We absolutely loved it so much. It also is great if you want to meal prep it or freeze it for the week. This one has to be one of my favorites at this time of year. This lemon butter chicken with pasta is so amazing. To a pot of boiling water, add in 16 ounces of rotini pasta. Cook it according to the package instructions, and while it's cooking away, I'm just going to cube up my 1 zucchini and my 1 yellow squash into smaller pieces. I'll set the squash and the zucchini to the side. Now that my pasta is cooked through, I'm going to remove about 1/3 cup of the water that the pasta is cooking in. This is going to help make our sauce here in a moment, but I'm just going to strain the pasta and set the pasta to the side. Into the same pot that we cooked the pasta in, add in a tablespoon of olive oil and a tablespoon of butter. Once the butter is nice and melty, add in a pound of cubed chicken breast. Then season it with a dash of pepper, salt, onion powder, garlic powder, and Italian seasoning. Those are my favorite seasonings for this recipe. Go ahead and cook the chicken through at this point. Now that my chicken is cooked through, I'm going to remove it to a plate and I'm going to set this plate to the side. Into the same pot that we cooked the chicken in, add in about a tablespoon of olive oil and then just add in the zucchini and squash from earlier. Now you're going to want to season this up with a dash of salt, pepper, about a teaspoon of onion powder, a teaspoon of garlic powder, and oregano. Stir this all together and let this cook for about 3 to 4 minutes. After you're through cooking this together for that time, you're going to want to add in about 4 tablespoons of butter. Next, add in the juice from 1 lemon. Add that right in there. I'm just using my lemon squeezer. Now I'm tossing in a tablespoon of minced garlic and the reserved pasta water. Give this a stir and let the butter melt down. Once the butter has disappeared and it is nice and melty, add back in the cooked chicken along with the cooked pasta. Give this a stir, and then once you have this well combined, add in a cup of Parmesan cheese. I know it might sound like a lot of Parmesan cheese, but this is kind of like the sauce we're making, so it really does help with the flavor. Once the Parmesan melts down, you could serve this up. If you are a lemon fan, you will absolutely love this dinner. It kind of has like a light, fresh taste about it. It really is so good, and it really is perfect for this time of year. I never ever make gnocchi, but I've been wanting to make it for a while, so now we're making this sausage and tomato gnocchi. To my Dutch oven on the stove, I added 1 diced up white onion along with a pound of sausage. For the seasonings, I added in a teaspoon of Italian seasoning, a teaspoon of garlic powder, then a half a teaspoon of pepper and salt. The last thing I added in was a tablespoon of minced garlic. I broke the sausage up and I am going to cook it through at this point. Now that we have our sausage browned and cooked through, I'm removing any excess grease in the pan. I'm just doing it with my spatula and a paper towel. I found that this little trick works wonderfully. Now I'm going to add in our 3/4 cup of heavy cream along with a can of diced tomatoes. I like using the Italian style petite diced tomatoes, but you could use any diced tomatoes you like. For the gnocchi, I'm using 16 ounces of potato gnocchi. I found it at my local Walmart. Most grocery stores sell it. And then I added in 4 cups of fresh spinach. I gave this a stir and I let it simmer on my stove for about 12 to 15 minutes. I did stir it frequently. Now that we have our gnocchi cooked and our spinach has wilted down dramatically, as you could see, I added in about 1.5 cups of mozzarella cheese that I shredded. I gave this a stir to let the cheese melt down, and then it was time to enjoy it. I sprinkled the top of mine with fresh parsley and Parmesan cheese, mainly to make it look pretty, but if you don't normally eat gnocchi and if you haven't tried it, I definitely suggest you trying it. It's kind of like a mixture of potato and pasta. That's the best way I could describe it. I serve this alongside of a side salad with spring mix, tomato, dried cranberries, and avocado with feta cheese. Now we're getting started on our meatless meal, the Southwestern skillet. So to begin, we are going to cut up our veggies, 1 red bell pepper and a yellow onion. If you want to use other veggies for this recipe, you certainly can. Now over to the pan on my stove, I have about 2 tablespoons of hot olive oil in there. I added those veggies and I'm going to cook them until they are soft. It took about 7 minutes. Now that they are soft, I added in a tablespoon of minced garlic. I gave this a stir and let the garlic become fragrant. Now I'm going to be adding in our 2 tablespoons of taco seasoning along with 1 cup of Orzo pasta. If you don't normally cook with Orzo pasta, it's kind of like a mixture between rice and pasta. It really is good. Now I'm adding in 1 can of drained and rinsed black beans, a drained can of corn, and 2 cups of chicken broth. Next, I'm going to toss in 1 can of rotel. I gave this a really good stir and I let this simmer covered on my stove for about 15 to 20 minutes or until the orzo was cooked, and I did stir this frequently while it was simmering. Now that our orzo has cooked and most of the liquid has absorbed, I'm going to add in about a half a cup of Mexican style cheese. If you don't care for cheese, you certainly do not need to add the cheese in, and you can make this dairy free very easily. But here's my plate of food. I topped mine with fresh avocado slices, cilantro, and lime. This has to be one of my all-time favorite meatless meals just because it really is filling. It has quite a bit of protein in it, and we really did not miss the meat in this meal. Now we're getting started on this sausage and rice, so over to my cutting board, I'm going to cut 14 ounces of smoked sausage into half moons. You could use any smoked sausage you like, or like chicken sausage. Over to the pot on my stove, I added in 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Then I added in the sausage along with 1 green bell pepper. I just tossed it in there. Sear the sausage and the pepper on a higher heat for about 3 to 5 minutes until it is like golden brown and gorgeous on the outside. Now add in 6 ounces of tomato paste. I'm just using this can, and if you open up the top of the can of tomato paste and take it off and then just push the bottom through, it works wonderfully. But stir that tomato paste in. This will enhance the flavor. Now add in 2 1/3 cup of chicken broth along with 1 cup of uncooked white rice or jasmine rice. For the seasonings, I added in a teaspoon of salt, teaspoon of pepper, teaspoon of garlic powder and onion powder, then 2 teaspoons of Italian seasoning. Give this a stir and scrape those flavorful bits off the bottom of your pot and let this simmer on your stove covered for about 20 to 25 minutes. You do want to stir this occasionally while it's simmering, and if the liquid line gets too low, feel free to add in about 1/3 cup more water at a time until your rice is tender. Once your rice is nice and fluffy, you could serve this dinner up. I sprinkled the top of my plate with a little bit of Parmesan cheese, but this dinner is super rich, delicious, and flavorful. You could always make it your own by adding ingredients or subtracting ingredients. You can make it with ground beef instead of sausage, or really anything you'd like. My husband loves this one. We are making this one pot cheesy beef and potatoes now. I'm starting out by peeling and dicing my 4 russet potatoes, a yellow onion, and a yellow bell pepper. Over to the pan on my stove, I have about a tablespoon of olive oil in there. My oil is hot at this point. I added the potatoes and onion in there. I'm just going to cook the potatoes and onion for about 4 minutes on the stove. After that cooking time is up, I just added the bell pepper in along with a tablespoon of minced garlic, my 1 pound of ground beef, or you could use ground turkey, ground chicken, or any meat substitute that you like. And then for the seasonings, I tossed in a teaspoon of pepper, salt, Italian seasoning, and 2 teaspoons of paprika. I'm going to break the ground beef up right now, and I'm going to let it cook for about 5 minutes on my stove, so the ground beef won't be completely cooked through at this point. I added in 3/4 cup of chicken broth, and I'm going to let this cook covered for about 5 to 10 minutes, or until the ground beef is cooked through and the potatoes are tender. At that point, I added in 1 cup of Colby Jack cheese. I gave it a stir, and then I served this dinner up. Here's my plate of food. This dinner is so hearty and delicious. It has very minimal ingredients, and if you want to add ingredients to this, you certainly can, and you could also subtract ingredients to really make it your own and customize it for you and your family. This sausage and orzo soup has to be one of my all-time favorite soups ever. To my large Dutch oven, I added in a tablespoon of olive oil along with a tablespoon of minced garlic, 1 yellow onion that I diced, and 1 pound of sausage. You could use any type of sausage you like. You could use the sweet sausage or the hot sausage. Just break the sausage up at this point and cook it through. Now that our sausage is cooked through, I'm going to remove any excess grease in my pot, and I'm just doing that with my large spoon and wiggling a paper towel around in there until I think I got it all. Now I'm adding in my pepper, just a dash of that, 2 teaspoons of Italian seasoning, and 1 teaspoon of salt. Next, add in your 4 1/2 cups of chicken broth, followed by 2 14-ounce cans of petite diced tomatoes. I definitely recommend you using the petite diced tomatoes tomatoes compared to like the regular diced tomatoes for this recipe. I just really like how small they are. I gave this a stir, scraping all those flavorful bits off the bottom of my pot. Then I added in my 1 cup of dry orzo. And if you don't typically cook with orzo, this is what it looks like. It's almost like a mixture between rice and pasta, kind of like a large rice but has the pasta texture. I just find it at Walmart. But I let this simmer on my stove covered for about 10 minutes, stirring it often. Here's what it looks like after that orzo is cooked through. I'm going to add in my 3 cups of fresh spinach. I'll stir that in and then I'll put the lid on top and let this spinach wilt for about 2 minutes. Spinach takes like no time at all to wilt down, so now that it has wilted, I'm going to add in 1/3 cup of half and half, and then after you stir that half and half in, it is time to serve it up. Here's what dinner looks like. Like I said before, this has to be one of my all-time favorite soups ever. It is packed full of so much great flavor. This soup also reheats nicely from the refrigerator and the freezer. Now we're making this yellow chicken curry with rice. So to my big Dutch oven on the stove, I'm adding a tablespoon of olive oil right in there. Once my oil was hot, I added my 2 pounds of cubed chicken breast along with 1 yellow onion that I diced, 1 red bell pepper that I diced, and then a teaspoon of curry powder. Curry powder is very strong, but it doesn't really have any sodium in it, so you're also going to want to add in a 1/2 tablespoon of salt and then a teaspoon of pepper. Cook this on your stove for about 3 minutes. The chicken will not be completely cooked through at this point, so after the 3 minutes of cooking, remove the chicken to a plate. In the same pot that we just cooked the chicken in, add a cup of uncooked jasmine rice, followed by 2 cups of chicken broth, 1 cup of water, and then for the seasonings, a 1/2 tablespoon of salt again, a 1/2 teaspoon of pepper, and then 2 teaspoons of curry powder. Give this a stir and let this simmer on your stove for about 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, you're going to want to give this a stir, and you're going to want to add back in the partially cooked chicken from earlier. And since the chicken is not cooked through and neither is the rice, they need to cook through at this point. So we're going to let this simmer covered for about 15 to 18 minutes. I did stir it occasionally just so the rice didn't stick. And once the rice was tender and the chicken was cooked through, you're going to want to add in a 1/2 cup of coconut milk right now. This is the brand that I'm using. We really like it. And if you don't want to use coconut milk, you could always use heavy cream as a substitute. Also add in your 1/4 cup of cilantro, give this a stir, and then you could serve this up. This dinner is so flavorful. It really is easy to throw together, and if you've never tried chicken curry like this before, I really suggest you doing that. We serve this alongside of some naan bread. This is the brand that I just bought at my Walmart. It really is good. We like to heat it up either in the air fryer or the oven. Now we're making this orzo with a rich and creamy sauce, and if you know me, you know by now how much I love orzo, and I'm going to tell you why I love it so much here in a moment. But to my large pot on the stove, I added in 1 pound of ground beef and 1 yellow onion that I diced. I'm just going to break this ground beef up and cook it through. If you have a lot of excess grease in your pot after the ground beef is cooked through, just remove it. But next add in 1 tablespoon of minced garlic along with a teaspoon of salt, pepper, onion powder, garlic powder, dried basil, and oregano. And like I said before, I'm going to tell you why I love orzo so much. So just a little bit of orzo goes a long way. So for this recipe, I'm just using 1 cup of dried orzo. So I added that orzo in, and that is going to feed my family plus give us some leftovers for lunch the next day. So you don't have to use a whole box of orzo, just a little will go a long way. That's why I just love it. Well, enough with my orzo talk. I also added in a cup of beef broth, 14 ounces of tomato sauce, and a cup of heavy cream. I'm going to let this simmer on my stove for about 3 minutes. I did stir often just so nothing burned to the bottom of the pot. After that time was up, I added in my 3/4 cup of water, 2 cups of fresh chopped spinach, and 1/3 cup of Parmesan cheese. I'm going to let this simmer covered for 8 more minutes, just until the orzo is tender, and you do want to make sure you do stir it often while it is simmering. Like I said before, you just don't want the orzo to burn to the bottom of the pot. This is one of the most delicious, richest dinners, and I do want to let you know, if you don't want to use ground beef in this recipe, you certainly don't need to. You can make this with sausage as a substitute, or you can make this with ground chicken, ground turkey, or any meat substitute like tofu. Now we're making this hearty ham and potato soup. We're going to start out by cutting up our vegetables. Peel and dice 3 large russet potatoes. Slice 2 cups of carrots into smaller pieces. Slice 2 ribs of celery into smaller pieces as well, and then dice 1 yellow onion. Set these vegetables to the side. Now over to my large Dutch oven, or you could use a large pot. Add in 1 tablespoon of olive oil and 1 tablespoon of butter. Once the butter has melted down and the oil is hot, add in the celery, carrots, and onion. Saute those vegetables around for about 4 to 5 minutes to start to soften them. After that time is up, add in a tablespoon of minced garlic and stir that garlic around for a minute. Now add in the potatoes that we cut up earlier, along with 2 cups of cooked ham that you kind of cut into bite-sized pieces. I just used some remaining ham from the holidays, or I also like this ham. If you don't have any remaining ham, you could just use this. I like to keep one of these in my freezer. These ham steaks are a very good price and they are full of flavor. They're just super great if you're on a budget as well. But I gave this a really good stir. Now you're going to add in 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour. Stir that flour around until it kind of becomes a golden color. Now add in 2.5 cups of chicken broth. Add it in slowly and stir it while you're adding it in. This is going to help so the flour doesn't become clumpy in this recipe. Now that we have all of the broth in the pot, we're going to add in our 2 teaspoons of salt and 1 teaspoon of pepper. Bring this up to a simmer, and you're going to let this simmer covered for about 10 to 15 minutes, or until your potatoes are fork tender, of course. Depending on how large you cut your potatoes is how long this needs to simmer, but once my simmering time was up, I gave this a stir, and then I tested to see if these potatoes were fork tender with a fork. But now that they are fork tender, I'm just adding in my 3 cups of milk. I'm going to let the milk heat through. You don't want to bring this up to a simmer or a boil with the milk because you don't want to curdle the milk. But after a couple of minutes of just letting this heat through, I served it up. We topped ours with a little bit of shredded sharp cheddar cheese and pepper. This soup is so hearty and delicious. It has a wonderful, rich flavor. It is out of this world good. This one is for all of my meatless meal friends. We are making this white broccoli pasta. To my large pan, I added in a tablespoon of butter and a tablespoon of olive oil. Once the butter was good and melty and the oil was hot, I tossed in a tablespoon of minced garlic. Once my garlic was fragrant, it only took about 15 seconds. I added in 2 cups of chicken broth and 1 1/4 cups of half and half, then my seasonings, a 1/2 teaspoon of onion powder, garlic powder, paprika, and then a teaspoon of Italian seasoning and salt, and then lastly a 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. I'm just going to give this a really good stir and bring this up to a simmer. Once simmering, add in a 1/2 cup of elbow pasta, or really any type of pasta you like. Make sure the pasta is covered in the liquid, and then put the lid on top and let this simmer covered for about 3 minutes. After 3 minutes of simmering, now it's time to add in your fresh broccoli. This is just 1 large head of broccoli that I cut into smaller florets. I'm also adding in a 1/2 cup of heavy cream at this point, and I'll give this a really good stir. I'll let this continue to simmer covered for an additional 8 minutes or until my pasta is tender. Now that the pasta and broccoli are tender, we are going to add in our 1/2 cup of Parmesan cheese. Just sprinkle that in and then stir this until the cheese is melty, and then you could serve it up. Here's what this dinner looks like. It really is super simple to throw together, but the taste is extravagant. I love this meal because you could really make it your own by adding different meats if you want to add meats to this, or you could add different vegetables if you'd like. This one is a super fun one. We are making this cheeseburger pasta now. To the pot on my stove, I'm adding in 1 pound of ground beef. Break the ground beef up and cook it until it's about 50% of the way cooked through, so not completely cooked through. At this point, you'll want to add in a tablespoon of minced garlic along with a yellow onion that you diced. Go ahead and continue to cook this ground beef now until it is completely cooked through. Once it's cooked through, just remove any excess grease from your pot, and now you're going to want to add in about a tablespoon of regular ketchup and 2 tablespoons of yellow mustard and 3 tablespoons of tomato paste. Give this a stir to incorporate all of those ingredients together. Now you're going to want to add in your 4 cups of beef broth along with 1 pound of elbow pasta. Give this a stir and bring it up to a simmer. Let this simmer covered for about 10 to 15 minutes. You do want to stir it occasionally while it's simmering, just so nothing sticks to the bottom of your pot and your pasta cooks evenly. Now that I have my pasta to the tenderness that I like it to be, I am going to add in a half a cup of milk. You are also going to want to add in a half a cup of sour cream. I do want to mention I do have my heat off at this point. Lastly, add in 1 cup of shredded cheddar cheese. Stir this around to incorporate the sour cream in and melt the cheese, then you could serve it up. I topped mine with diced dill pickles. This really does taste super similar to a traditional cheeseburger. I really like making this one because it's simple to throw together and it really is a lot of fun. It's not your typical type of boring dinner. Now we're making these Tuscan pork chops, and oh boy, you are in for a treat with this one. I have about 4 pork chops right here, and into this other bowl I added in 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour. Now I'm seasoning the pork chops on both sides with a dash of salt and pepper. After I was finished seasoning the pork chops on both sides, I just dipped each of the pork chops in that flour, and then I just kind of shook off the excess flour. I do want to let you know, if you don't want to do this with pork chops, you could always use chicken breast as a substitute. This would be super good with chicken breast. Anyway, after I was finished coating the pork chops in the flour, over to the pan on my stove, I added in a tablespoon of butter and a tablespoon of olive oil. Once the oil and butter were hot, I added my pork chops right in there. I'm going to sear the pork chops for about 2 to 3 minutes on a higher heat right now. You just want the pork chops to kind of form like a nice golden crust on the outside. This is going to give the pork chops a lot of added flavor. But after I was finished searing the pork chops, I just added them to a plate and set them to the side. In the same pan that I cooked the pork chops in, I added in a tablespoon of minced garlic, 1/3 cup of balsamic vinegar, 1/4 cup of chicken broth, and 2 tablespoons of honey. I brought this up to a simmer, and then I added in a 14-ounce can of petite diced tomatoes. I'm going to give this a stir, and then I just let this thicken for a couple of minutes. I added back in my pork chops, and now I'm going to just coat the pork chops in the sauce, and I'm going to let them simmer for about 5 to 10 minutes, or until the pork chops are cooked through and the sauce has thickened to the way that I like it to be. Once it looks like this, you could just sprinkle a little bit of Parmesan cheese on the top and mozzarella if you'd like. Let the cheese melt down, and then you could just enjoy this dinner. I served ours over a bed of egg noodles, but you could serve this over rice or cauliflower rice for a lower carb option, or you could just eat this the way it is. I also served this with a side salad. That sauce is so rich and delicious. I could basically just drink it. It seriously is that good. Now we're making this Italian chicken and rice, so over to my Dutch oven on the stove, or you could use a large pot. Add in a tablespoon of butter and a tablespoon of olive oil. Once the butter is melted and the oil is hot, add in your pound of cubed chicken breast, along with 1 diced yellow onion. And today for the seasonings, I'm using a half a tablespoon of ranch seasoning, 1 teaspoon of pepper, 1 teaspoon of paprika, and a teaspoon of Italian seasoning. Give this a really good stir, and then and you are going to let this cook on your stove for about 5 minutes. And this recipe is actually in my cookbook. If you didn't know this yet, I just released my first ever cookbook. It's on page 131 and my cookbook is available now for you guys. There's over 8 sections in my cookbook ranging from breakfast, sides to dinners, desserts. My cookbook just has it all and I'm so excited for you guys to see it. But after that cooking time is up with my chicken, I'm just going to add in a tablespoon of minced garlic. Stir that garlic around until it is fragrant. Now add in 1 cup of uncooked jasmine rice, or you could use white rice, whatever you'd like. Then 2.5 cups of chicken broth. Stir this around and scrape those flavorful bits off the bottom of your pot. Now cover this with a lid and let this simmer on your stove for about 17 to 20 minutes. Just stir this occasionally while it's simmering so the rice doesn't burn to the bottom of your pot. But once the rice is tender, add in your 1/3 cup of Parmesan cheese and 1/2 cup of heavy cream. Let the cheese melt down and then you could serve this up. I served this Italian chicken alongside of steamed peas today, and this Italian chicken will make your house smell so unbelievably good. This recipe is very easy to throw together. That rice is like so flavorful and so is the chicken, but this recipe is in the one pot section of my book, one of my favorite sections. One pot meals are just so easy to make. And then also in the back of my book, I have included a section for like substitutions for common ingredients that I use that you might not use or you might not have on hand in the moment. So that section's really helpful too. From the bottom of my heart, thank you guys for being here today. I love you all so much, and I know each and every one of you is going through something different right now, but stay strong, you guys. Don't quit, don't give up, and I will see you in my next video. I am thankful for each and every one of you guys. Bye for now.